Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. Fuzzy Wuzzy had no hair. Fuzzy Wuzzy wasn't fuzzy, was he?
Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. You know, I've heard a lot of stuff about this game. It handles horror in a completely unique way. It's got that interesting sanity system, and it's an M-rated game published by Nintendo. You know, whenever there's a video on YouTube that talks about this game, I usually exit out of it immediately. I want to try and experience this game as fresh as possible. However, it's one of the pricier games for the GameCube, and when you've got Animal Crossing, you don't sit down and think, you know, I would really like to play a 20-year-old GameCube game right about now. Fortunately, I've got this show called Patreon Picks. It's a show where my people on Patreon, they give me some money, I give them some picks, and then I pick one out of my bingo drum. The last game that was selected out of the bingo drum was Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. So I finally grabbed it, I yeeted it into my GameCube, and then I was able to find out that this cult classic kinda sucks. Alright, so we boot the game up, we get an Edgar Allan Poe quote, and then we get a skull to introduce everyone's favorite logo,
Nintendo.
Nintendo Skulls.
You can't have one without the fucking other.
So here we have it, Eternal Darkness. Silicon Knights are responsible for this, and I know that I said it sucks, but it's not a complete write-off. The story's decent, if a bit long. It has a lot of really cool ideas, and some of them are executed very nicely. You know what, let's just start off a new game. I'll get to it. So you start off the story, and an old dude named Edward starts saying how he got his mitts on a cursed book and doomed his entire bloodline to pain and torment. In fact, he's dead. The only surviving member of the Rovus family is Alex here. Oh, we're playing! Yeah, 30 seconds of exposition, and I'm surrounded in a confined space, a shotgun, and 10 zombies. And who says good things come to those who wait? And I'm actually doing a pretty dang good job of fighting off these zombies. I'm kiting them without getting hit. But as soon as it starts, it ends.
Oh, sheesh, y'all. 'Twas a dream!
But I get a phone call and I head to my grandpa's mansion, and the cop guy explains that he was murdered. Alex says, you gotta catch the culprit, cop guy. And then he says, yeah, that was the plan. She says, you know what, screw it, I'll solve the case. And then I guess the cops leave the mansion and just let you loose. Okay, so Eternal Darkness is mostly a puzzle game. If I had to compare it to anything, it would be a point-and-click adventure game. You walk up to every moderately interesting looking thing in the room, you hope that you get an item on it, and then you hope that your mind can interpret what it is that you need to use that item on. The first puzzle isn't too bad. You find a key next to a clock that is stuck at 3:33. You use that key to get a clock hand, and then you find a clock that's missing the minute hand. You put the minute hand on the clock, set that clock to 3:33, and boom! A secret room opens up. In this room, we find a tome of Eternal Darkness. I start reading it, and all of a sudden we're taken back to the year 26 BC. We read about the Roman general Pius Augustus. He's beckoned by a mysterious voice to some stone spires, and then he's taken underground. And now we get to play as Pius. So, as Pius, you get a sword, and you go through this chamber, you solve puzzles, and you have combat. And this is gonna be my biggest gripe of the game. You may have noticed that when I was in the dream gunning down the zombies, we had beloved Resident Evil tank controls. So, until the age of gunpowder, we have tank control melee combat. Oh yes! Tank control, melee combat. Don't worry, it's just as bad as it sounds. It is beyond clunky, and not too much to say about the puzzles. They're pretty simple. Actually, you know what? While I'm in criticizing mode, these are baby puzzles for babies. More often than not, when you get to a puzzle that needs an object, you will have already entered the room and picked up the item. There's a hole in the wall and it has a glowing blue symbol above it. Maybe I slide in the block that has a blue symbol on it. Yep, brain-dead puzzles and awful combat. Eternal Darkness is Zelda, if Zelda was bad. Okay, my two biggest gripes out of the way, now I can focus on the cooler aspects of Eternal Darkness. So, Pius makes it to a room with 3 artifacts. There isn't much of a difference here besides, like, the final cutscene, the color of some puzzles, a boss 3/4 through the game, and so I just randomly chose red. Then Pius gets straight up killed and his skin melts off, and now he's a servant of... I don't know how to freaking pronounce that Lovecraftian word. Anyway, back to Alex. She gets a gladius. She never got to use it, but she got one. Anyway, I look around the room a little bit more, and then I get a chapter from the Tome of Eternal Darkness. And this is gonna happen a lot. As I unlock more items, skills, and spells, I'll be able to go to more areas of the mansion. I'll get a page from the tome, and then I'll be able to play as the next person. First up is Elia, a girl living in the Cambodian jungle in the year 1150. And we have a temple with booby traps in it.
You said traps!
You can see the pressure plates on the floor pretty easily, and since I don't know how to run yet, navigating these hallways was simple. And it's in this chapter that they start adding in Eternal Darkness's main gimmick. You see, the game's subtitle is Sanity's Requiem. And as your characters go insane, the game will mess with you. Not your character, you. At one point, I got Elia's sanity way down there, and it muted my game. The thing is, though, that's not my TV's font. Mute looks like this. So I was just immediately like, oh, Lord, I'm playing Eternal Darkness. Why'd I go into, like, the Beatles accent? Oh, great job, Eternal Darkness. You know what? I'm gonna put that sanity effect right on the fridge. That way we can all look at it.
All right.
These effects only last for a couple of seconds, but you know what? It's charming. I actually really like this. So I go through the temple and eventually what the frick is that? Seriously, there's this big old thing. It's scared of Pius Augustus. I think that Pius was trying to steal his heart, and he doesn't want his heart to get stolen, so he just gives it to Elia. And then Elia absorbs it into her body. Quickly, she gets caught by Pius, and Pius says, "Give me the heart." And then he checks her pockets, and he couldn't find it, so he just nailed her to the wall to die. Okay! Now we're back to Alex, and I can explore the mansion a little more. I find my next chapter, and we go back to the year 814 to play as Anthony, a messenger to the King Charlemagne the Frank. He gets a message that was meant for Charlemagne's eyes only, and Anthony immediately takes it to a corner and looks at it, and he is hit with a curse that will kill him. So the goal of this level is to tell Charlemagne that someone is trying to assassinate him. So we get to the Abbey, and then we do the puzzles, which are just so simple. You break 2 jars, and then you use the repair spell to fix them. Oh, and then they add in another dumb enemy. It's called the Trapper. It's like a landmine thing that show up in all the levels now. If you set them off, you'll get warped away to another dimension that does nothing besides waste about a minute of your life. It's not difficult or hard to get out of it. It's just a time waster, and it's plain annoying. So I go through the whole church, I get the key so I can get into the room to warn Charlemagne, but you know what? This is quite possibly the dumbest cutscene I've ever seen, and I want you to bear the burden of watching this cutscene.
Despite your faith, there is little to save you from the power of Ulya.
Alright, so Alex read about the repair spell that Anthony used, so now she can cast it on this broken key she has. Now we can go to the second story of the mansion, where we find more pages of the tome. So that means it's time to play as Kareem. He's in love with a woman, but she wants a treasure. So, to win over her affection, he's gonna go get the treasure for her. The interesting thing is that this is the exact same area that Pius Augustus went through, but it's a little bit different because this takes place during the 400s. So Kareem grabs a saber and we get going. And now it's time to do some complaining because I saw a lot of insanity effects during Kareem's level. Because this is how it works. You got 3 meters. You got health, magic, and sanity. Health, pretty self-explanatory. You get punched, you lose health. You can get it back through either using spells or items. Magic. If you use spells, you lose magic, but you get magic back by walking around. Sanity. If an enemy sees you, you'll lose some sanity, but if you knock the enemy down and perform the killing blow, you get that sanity back. Well, in Kareem's chapter, they add in an enemy that, after taking enough damage, blows not only itself up, but every other blue zombie in the room. And with all these enemies blowing up, you don't get a chance to recover your sanity. So let me tell you about some of the effects our boy Kareem experienced. So it turned off my TV, but was like an old CRT TV, so it didn't fool me for 1 second, and honestly, it was a little charming. I got a blue screen of death, you know, like the GameCube is notorious for. I got jumped by a ton of enemies, and then it said that the GameCube controller was unplugged, which is interesting because when you actually unplug the GameCube controller, it doesn't say a dang thing. Also, it had the sound effect of a baby crying. Actually, to be more precise, it had the sound effect of a baby crying in the other room. Okay, How many parents back in the year 2000 picked up this game? They had a hard day at work, and then they come home and they take care of their kids, and then they finally sit down and start playing this brand new game they picked up. But since the blue zombies blow themselves up, they're unable to finish them off. And so the sanity drops. So they're playing, and then all of a sudden they hear their kids start crying. So they put the game down, they go, and their kid's not crying, their kid's asleep, and they just come back, and they're getting confused. If the answer, by the way, is more than one, this game is just plain sadistic. I'm gonna be honest though, this last one actually did trick me though. Kareem had this item, a family heirloom that said it would heal my HP. My HP was pretty low, along with my sanity, so I decided to pop some HP and... That's not healing. Eventually, Kareem got to the treasure, but then he was visited by the woman he loved, and she said, "Hey, while you were gone, I became the mistress of a nobleman," and then the wife found out, and she kinda got mad and chopped me up. Also, I don't want the treasure anymore. I don't think anyone should have the treasure. Hey, Kareem, would you be a darling and, stay here forever protecting the treasure?
The things I do for love.
Oh, and one more Sanity effect. After I finished the chapter, I pretended like I had just finished the demo of the game. So I enchant my Gladius, go down to the kitchen, stick the sword into the freaking the spice rack. I get to the spice rack, and naturally, spice rack had the next chapter. For this chapter, you play as Alex's great-great-grandfather, Maximilian Rovis. You get dual flintlock pistols, you walk around the mansion, point them at your servants.
Well, this just won't do. Tell Smith to work for his pay.
And after opening up a portal, you have to kill some of your servants.
Yeah, next time your children will pay for your transgressions, Smith.
You also get a spell that allows you to heal your health and your magic, which costs the exact same amount of magic that it would take to get the magic back. Oh, and sanity, which is a bit of a letdown. You see, they have this cool, fun, innovative system with the sanity mechanics, but now they allow you to heal your sanity at will? I opted not to use this spell simply because why would you play Eternal Darkness if you're not gonna let its most innovative feature be used? But, oh man, it feels bad to intentionally play a game suboptimally. However, now I can recover sanity from the blowy-uppy zombies because, and this is pretty cool, Maximilian is a doctor. After you kill enemies with him, he can perform an autopsy that tells you about fighting them, and it mentions that the blowy-uppy zombies blow up by singing, and if you chop off their head, they can't sing anymore, allowing you to stab them and get your sanity back. After slinging spells and examining corpses, I headed into the dungeon with my dual pistols, and eventually I beat the boss. Afterwards, Maximilian exclaims that took a lot out of him, and that there's an entire city of those guys. Yeah, he needs to go back to the surface to raise an army. Yeah, he got institutionalized. Alright, so after learning Great-Great-Grandpa's Reveal Invisible spell, I get to play a chapter featuring Bootleg Indiana Jones. We go to the same ruins that Elliot was in, but now it's the 80s, and you know what that means, right? Guns! Yep, Bootleg Indiana Jones is packing heat. We got pistols and shotguns. Yeah, this level was a blast. I mean, it's kind of stupid too, because this is the same level that Elliot was on. So once again, we have those booby traps. But I have a healing spell now, so I just sprinted through everything with no regard for any of it. If I got low HP, I just shoot my arm up with a demon spell, and I got my HP up. I don't really care. Eventually, I make it to that weird Scarlet Cthulhu demon that Elliot was friends with, and I find Elliot pinned to the wall where they left her. She tells Bootleg Indiana Jones about the demon heart that she has, and instructs him to take it to Grandpa Edward so it doesn't fall into the clutches of eternal darkness. Then we have a flashback where the heart is, Alex retrieves it, and then she uses a spell that the Bootleg Indiana Jones guy learned to blow up a window to get the next chapter, where we play as Paul Luther, a devoted monk in the midst of the Inquisitions, circa 1485. Now, I kind of played this level out of order a little bit, because you're supposed to go down into the basement and get the mace and beat the dudes to death. But I mainly just cast the spell that I learned last chapter called Damage Field. Yeah, I just cast the spell, and the AI just walks in the electrical bug zapper until they die. So I search the cathedral and find out that this is Anthony's level. In fact, we found Anthony's body. Wait, they just left his body there for 600 years? So old Anton comes back from the dead to kill Paul. But he's no match for my brilliant tactic of just sitting in a damage field until he fries himself. Then he drops the longsword and I picked it up to fight the unholy demons. course, they did one thing here that I really hate. So they have this enemy that lots of other characters have seen, and for no discernible reason, this one has a one-hit kill. And dying in any chapter means going back to the very start, which is just not fun. I was at full health, what the frick? Alright, so we get to the end of the chapter, and here's my character Paul.
Okay.
So during Paul's level, he had to play some song on the organ. So when Alex goes and plays the exact same song, she gets a chapter where you get to play as a Venetian architect in 1460. So you go back to Kareem and Pius's level. You see, Pius is thinking of doing some renovations, so he wants an architect to give it the look over. And this was probably one of the worst parts of the game, simply because Roberto, he's a fat guy. And that's one really cool thing, is that all the characters have different traits. For example, Pius was a general and had a lot of health, while Paul Luther didn't have a lot of health, but since he was a bit of a scholar, he had access to a huge magic pool. But Roberto, well, you don't really see the endurance. He can only run for about 5 seconds before his movement gets halved. But I will forgive it because later he plays a firefighter who, for as far as I can tell, has unlimited endurance. So Roberto inspects the ruins and he goes up to Pius and he asks, so is everything good? Can we continue with the building? And Roberto says, dude, I think this place might be cursed. And Pius is like, yeah? And then he sacrifices Roberto to a demon. After that, Alex gets the same abilities of Roberto and is able to inspect the room where she finds the next chapter. It's the height of World War I, and we play as, I don't know, Dimitri from Anastasia? Anyways, the cathedral that Paul Luther was in has been converted into a field hospital where the dead and dying are being fed to that monster that smashed Paul. And this is the chapter where I realized that Eternal Darkness is essentially a point-and-click game. There is one puzzle that is just moon logic. So I found a fuse box and I looked everywhere in the church for a spare fuse, until finally I looked up the solution, and what I was supposed to do was shove my lucky penny that I had on my character into the dark thing. Oh, of course! It's nice going through a level during World War I, because you get to use a revolver and a bolt-action rifle, and that's one thing that I really like about this game. You play as all these different characters that have all these different weapons that really fit the eras and countries that they hail from. And they all have their own kill animations. However, the best weapons in the game are yet to come. Of course, Dimitri had a tough time finishing off all the enemies, so he had a lot of sanity effects for me. There's one where he grew too big, and there's one where he grew too small. And then there was another one where the enemies were just fun-sized. Look at the little zombie, he's so cute! And our boy Dimitri here got his own boss. I got stuck on the second phase here because I misread the situation. So there's this point where the boss gets covered in a white texture, and to me it looked like a shield, but this is actually when he's vulnerable. So yeah, I was stuck here for 20 minutes. I looked up the walkthrough that had the stupid penny trick, and bah! I killed him, I stole a relic, and got it to Grandpa Edward. Alright, after that, Alex gets a chapter where you get to play as Grandpa Edward. And to be perfectly frank, this is the best chapter because you get a pistol, a double-barrel shotgun, and an elephant gun. You'll start off by getting some counsel from Maximilian's ghost, but soon a vampire, as they call it, will start killing off your servants. You can't do anything to save this first chick, but it is imperative, absolutely imperative, that you save this first servant. If he dies, you can't get the key to the gun safe, and no key means you don't get the elephant gun, which is just figuratively and literally a blast. I mean, the level's not impossible if you don't have the elephant gun, but it's just the funnest weapon in the game. Set this sucker to fire 2 shells capable of stopping a rhino in its tracks, and you're in for a good time. I mean, it knocks you on your tuchus, but look what it did to the enemy! Anyway, Maximilian was institutionalized because people thought he was crazy when he tried to raise an army to fight the city of monsters beneath his house. Now, while not necessarily an army, Edward has a lot of guns, and he plans to finish Max's work. Now, it is a good thing that it is fun to shoot Edward's gun, because this is a long chapter. You see, to cast a spell in this game, you need to choose either level 3, 5, or 7. The bigger the spell, the longer to cast. However, down here in this city, you need to teleport to 9 separate towers, input a single rune, come out, solve a puzzle, and do a combat encounter, and then walk all the way back to the main room, just to teleport to another tower. And I want to reiterate that you do this 9 times! You put in the runes to cast Dispel, you destroy the city, and then 48 years later, you get your head chopped off. So after this, Alex reads a message from Grandpa saying that she can have his liquor now that he's dead. So she goes down and she doesn't get anything to drink, but she does get a pickaxe, which allows me to get into this room that I've known about since like the second hour of the game. Ah, the servants' quarters. Did I say that Maximilian was institutionalized for trying to raise an army? I've changed my mind about that one. Alright, now we get to the final chapter before Alex has to man up. 1991. The Gulf War. You're playing as a firefighter. At first I thought this was gonna be awesome. Just a buff dude with a ton of HP and a fireman's axe? Heck yeah! But no. Almost immediately we find an assault rifle with 500 shots and 10 grenades. Not as cool as an elephant rifle, but still pretty dang close. Pure steel. The level ends pretty cool too. So our boy Michael here gets his hands on some military grade explosives and then casts a level 7 enchantment on it. And then he just blows the whole thing sky high. He also managed to get his hands on an artifact that he went and gave to Edward, but now it's all on Alex. So, while Edward did leave a lot to his fledgling granddaughter, actually, is fledgling the right word? A young bird that has just fledged. Nope! He didn't leave her his elephant gun. All Alex has is a .38 revolver and a shotgun, but she doesn't have nearly as much combat as Edward did. She basically has to do the exact same thing as Grandpa. We need to light up 9 points individually, and rather than combat encounters, each room has you use one or more of the spells that you learned from the Tome of Eternal Darkness. Also, the ground will hurt you, so you need to cast the shield spell every time you enter the main hall. Now, instead of casting Dispel like Grandpa did, you need to cast Summon. You see, the plans have aligned, and Pius is bringing Unalak to kill everyone ever, but Alex is gonna summon the grass type to kill him. And so while you and Pius have a final struggle, up in space, the two Eldritch gods will also fight. Now, the final boss is actually embarrassingly easy. However, I did lose at one point because he made a damage field and then I got stuck in like an infinite combo.
Fool! I spit at thee. The darkness shall be eternal!
Okay, so I will mention that this fight is as easy as run up to him, hit him with a sword, run away. But it actually does have a pretty cool, like, emotional through line, because through the fight, all of the previous owners of the Tome of Eternal Darkness are channeled through you, so all of them get to land a hit on Augustus, and it's kind of like all 10 of the people are fighting with you. Oh, and then I learned that my sword has a long-range throwing move, and then I just spammed it until Pius freaking died. And then we saved the whole world from eternal darkness. So that's Eternal Darkness. It's an odd game that's got a lot of really unique ideas. Some that it handles excellently, some less so. I mean, it's a very interesting game. I'd love to see a remake or a sequel. You know, it was fun playing as all the different characters, but the tank control melee combat can die in a fire. If they just remade this game with all the ideas they had, but you know, switch out the combat with maybe, I don't know, the newer Resident Evils have, that over shoulder would be pretty good. I don't care for the puzzle-centric nature, but I feel that you need that. What I mostly want to see is the Insanity Effects expanded upon. I mean, now that we've got LCD screens, I think if you have an HDMI cable attached, you could do some very interesting stuff. I'd love to see what they do with that. Honestly, my final review is you don't need to play this game. I'd avoid it. But if a sequel or a remake ever gets announced, keep your eyes peeled. All right, Patreon picks time. All right. Now for the picky pods of Patreon picks. So, I've got all of the picks that have ever been submitted, except for the ones I've taken out because they're already. I just love it when it stops recording in the middle of something that's really hard to redo. Yeah, I just threw in like over 100 pieces of paper, and I'm not gonna go through and find them all. Honestly, I don't go through and find them all. Like, one thing, like I say, oh yeah, I take the pics out. Taking the pics out takes so long. Look at how many pieces of paper there are. You think I'm gonna go sort that? No. We got all of these pieces of paper. I've mixed them all up. Give me the opening yes. So now, we're gonna see what the next game I'm gonna do. Is it gonna be one that's been there for months? Is it gonna be one that was just recently put in? The only way to find that out is to grab this piece of paper that says Harold Webb, 7 Samurai. This piece of paper has sat in there since March 2018. And it's finally time! Alright, I'm looking forward to it. See you later!